Welcome back on the AM show. Before we get into our next conversation, of course, we're talking about this one where some civil society organizations have petitioned the IMF on expenditure cuts in Ghana's basic educational sector. It's dated Thursday, yesterday, and on Thursday, April the 27th, 2023, at 19 hours GMT, EduWatch and representatives of over 600 civil society organizations, per the statement, working to promote access to quality basic education and social protection in Ghana, submitted a petition to the board of the International Monetary Fund. Why? Here's why. The petition calls on the IMF board to remove brutal expenditure cuts in Ghana's basic educational sector, arising from Ghana's bid to meet conditionalities for its extended credit facility application. Of course, that has to do with the IMF. And that's why it's ended up at their desk. Including or enclosed copy of petition submitted to the IMF board. And that's how the statement ended by Africa Education Watch. So they have submitted that petition together with 600 representatives of over 600 civil society organizations working to promote access to quality basic education and social protection in Ghana. They are simply saying the IMF, in granting us a program, should deal with that situation because there have been brutal expenditure cuts in Ghana's basic educational sector arising from the extended credit facility that we are pushing forward. And so that is the latest as far as that development is concerned. We'll be engaging our guests on this all-important matter to find out what exactly Africa Education Watch can share with us on that specific beat. We'll be getting to our guests shortly. So we have John Nko, Country Director, Action Aid Ghana. He also joins the conversation. We have Bernice Mpre Jechi, National Coordinator of the GNECC. She also joins the conversation. Ladies, gentlemen, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Benjamin Akapu. How are you doing? And good morning to your very cherished listeners. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
It's a pleasure having you. I love the way you mentioned my full name. Blurted it out like that. Anyway, a pleasure to have you. We've seen the statement by Africa Education Watch, but it shows that a lot of you, over 600 of these civil society organizations focusing on education, actually have an interest in there. Just let me start with you, John. Walk me through why you actually came on board for this statement to be put out. What exactly is the basis for this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, once again. If you have taken a very careful study of our press statement, you would have realized that it's a group of civil society organizations that are working on this. And the reason why we are setting out on this pathway is basically to call on the IMF and, if you like, the Bretton Woods institution in considering Ghana's bailout to remain to their promise of not ensuring that, government social protection programs are scathed from or face cuts from this expenditure rationalization, which is occasioned by the comprehensive debt restructuring program of government as one of the issues, and the fact that we need to consider a lot of expenditure cuts in order to be seen meeting some of the benchmarks, or if you like, the conditionalities required to ensure that we are reverting to the path of sustainability or financial sustainability. In this regard, our emphasis has been that although Ghana aims at restoring macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability, there is the increasing need to protect the vulnerable in this regard. And for example, if you look at our statement, we are focusing on education, and we realize that if this is not done and measuring on so far what government has submitted in terms of the medium-term expenditure framework to the IMF and also our maiden budget, it does suggest that there will be some forms of cuts, and we are calling on the IMF board to ensure that those cuts are reviewed and brought in line with, for example, if you like, the UNESCO and the GPA education framework benchmarks that has occasioned that countries that are working to enhance educational development in their countries need to be seen spending about 15% of their budget allocation to the education sector and so on and so forth. That is the reason why we are calling on the key stakeholders, including government, to reconsider the proposals that are being submitted to ensure that, for example, the Ghana School Feeding Program is not so much affected, capital expenditure in the education sector is not so much affected, and you may even be more well informed about the fact that there's in the media some demonstrations from the Ghana School Feeding Program contractors who are providing food for school children. And that means that we need to be seen engaged in prudent expenditure, prioritizing key focus areas in our educational governance, and for that matter, in the provision of gender-responsive public services such as education, for which the Ghana School Feeding Program is a critical part.
For you, Bernice Mprejechi, you are National Coordinator for the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition. What key issues got you on board as far as this petition is concerned?
All right. Thank you very much, Ben.
And my apologies if I've been murdering your name.
The name is Mprejechi.
Mprejechi. I knew there was something somewhere. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And good morning to you, John. I hope you are doing well.
John, she's addressing you. She's asking whether you're doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing very well. Bernice, and greetings to your team. Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so Ben, one of our major concerns this year is to see some improvements in our basic education, because everything about our basic education now, it is not, in fact, doing well. It is not doing well at all. Looking through to infrastructure, to capitation grants, the National Standardized Test, School Feeding Program, absence of debt, it is just too much for the basic education today in our country now as we speak. So being on board on this issue is that the promises that were made by our president, who is the GPA champion, he is supposed to encourage other African countries to commit enough funds into their education. Then how come every part of our basic school is in crisis? Children will go to school, they don't have desks to sit on. School feeding program is not going well. Capitation grant is not going. Already the amount is very minimal, very small, inadequate or insufficient, and yet it is not also released on time. So these are some of the things we are looking at as a coalition to petition the IMF to consider the decisions they've made, which may affect the basic education through from now to 2025. So looking at the 12% of the national budget allocated to education for 2023, 11% project expenditure allocation to education in 2024 to 2025, and then the 3% GDP allocation to education in 2023. So these are some of the things that we want the IMF board to look at, consider, so that we can have enough funding for our basic schools. If we are not able to build a foundation well, how do we move on to the latter? It is a major concern to us. So it is one of the reasons why we are all joining this campaign to make sure that our basic schools are well resourced. Thank you.
Interesting points you make there. For you, John, what are going to be the focal areas? She has made mention of the school feeding program, which in itself is in turmoil. In recent times, they've embarked on some industrial action, the capitation grants, among others. What for you are the crucial areas where these expenditure cuts are biting the hardest?
Yeah, so I think that to remain within the context of, our statement, we are looking a lot more in terms of the educational sector. And so to add to what Bernice has so eloquently discussed, one of the critical areas that needs a lot more focus has to do with educational infrastructure. So, for example, as we speak today, we have over 5,400 schools that continue to exist under trees. And so what that means is that there's the increasing need for a lot more educational investment, or if you like, capital investment in education. You would also realize that as part of the expenditure rationalization, even before now, government capped, for example, the GET fund. And so what that meant was that a certain proportion of the resources was to go into capital expenditure, with a lot more, I don't want to say diverted, but rechanneled towards other sectors of the economy. And so what that meant was that the outflow of resources that would have gone directly into the educational sector, and for that matter, to increase investment in terms of capital expenditure, has been reduced. If you further even look at what government did, by December 2022, a government secured a parliamentary amendment of the Act 974 to further tighten its cap action on the GET fund. So what that meant was that it was further reduced from 25% in terms of the capping to 17.5% of receivables. So what that meant was that, given our current economic situation, government is looking a lot more in terms of how it can ring-fence resources to support or do what we call budget support. And so the capital expenditure is struggling. If you go further to look at even teacher deployment, there are some fundamental challenges there, because COVID-19 revealed onto us some of the critical challenges in terms of the deficits, in terms of staffing. And what that means is that government should be seen to have a systematic, progressive plan towards enhancing educational expenditure. Now, as we speak, organized labor is busy organizing to engage government on their resources. All that goes into the educational critical expenditure, such as compensation. And there's the need for government to increasingly look at that. In addition to what I've said, there is also a critical group, or if you like, stakeholder in the Ghana educational system that we call out of school. And statistics does point to the fact that about 9% of the critical age of 4 to 18 have never stepped foot in school. And so what that means is that although we have made significant progress and advancement in terms of child enrollment in our schools, the point we are making is that there's still some work to be done, because the Ghana Statistical Service in the 2021 census or so pointed to the fact that these numbers does exist, and it's concerning if government is going to be able to fully implement the educational strategic plan. There's the need for government to also, cover this critical area of our work. Then, of course, we are talking about educational resource in terms of funding for teaching and learning materials that go hand in hand with quality education, and ensuring that the children that are at the basic school are giving, not only increased access, but we are also focusing more in teacher training, teacher refreshment, teacher capacity building, and ensuring that there is an enabling infrastructure. Although we are facing some form of financial challenges, but the educational sector, which government itself agrees as a critical linchpin in our development process or trajectory, needs to also be focused on as a critical prioritized area. And it is in this regard that we are calling the IMF to critically reflect on some of the cuts and stay to its promise not to do anything untoward in terms of these critical social services in a way that will ensure that the future of this country is not shortchanged, but we are focusing a lot more in educational development, child development, and therefore creating more progressively for the future a well-resourced critical manpower that will drive the engine of national development and reconstruction.
For you, Bernice, what action do you want to see taken on this in the immediate term? I mean, you've bypassed government because obviously it would appear that you've not got the returns expected from establishment, and you've gone to the IMF. Do you think this is going to have any impact on government's planning moving forward?
Yes, thank you. It should have some effect because these are issues that we've been talking about over and over again. Now, looking at school feeding caterers on strike now, those issues have come up. We have spoken, we had the engagement with government. They said they were going to pay and all that, but it has still not happened. So what we are asking for now is that we want the IMF to look at us so that the government would also take into consideration its plan and then its budgeting to ensure that we get this thing done. We want a review. We want the IMF to review the 2023 budget to reflect a minimum of 16% national budgetary allocation and 4% to GDP to education. We also want them to restore the 40% cut in the basic education budget for goods and services. And then within the anticipated increase, make specific allocation for basic school infrastructure development. We are talking about the infrastructure development because, like John was saying, we still have some schools under trees, and apart from the infrastructure, there are a lot of children packed in one classroom. And how can a teacher deliver quality education? If you look at children who graduate from the primary school, about a quarter of them are not able to read or be very efficient in English and mathematics because of the quality of education. We have developed new curriculum over 3 years, and we don't have enough textbooks for children to use to learn or teachers to teach. What kind of education outcome are we looking for at the basic level? So within the anticipated increase, we want a specific allocation for basic education infrastructure development. And we also want them to review the medium-term expenditure framework of the education sector to reflect the minimum of 16% national budgetary allocation and the 4% to GDP. And also reverse projected medium-term expenditure cuts, the Ghana School Feeding Program, and increase allocation in line with increasing inflation trends that is happening in our country now. Look at the amount of money that is given to each child as a school feeding. And look at how much food is costing on the market these days. What magic are these caterers supposed to perform to feed the children? Even with that, they are managing. How come the funds are also not going as promised? The minimum one, the very little one that has been given, that have been managed, is also not paid. Does it mean that we cannot fund our pro-poor policies in the education sector? These are serious issues that we want it addressed. And we are very sure that the government and IMF can plan accordingly to get those issues addressed. Thank you.
Right before I let go of the two of you, I'd just like to find out, it is government that is dealing at that level with the International Monetary Fund. You have petitioned the board of the fund to the end that you're hoping they will take action and help stem the tide of the expenditure cuts we are seeing. on the back of an IMF program, should we get it. How hopeful are you? And this question is to both of you. That's how we'll wrap the conversation. How hopeful are you of the IMF's cooperation? They can honestly decide to ignore you. Bernice, let's start with you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry, Bernice. Go ahead, Bernice.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Yes, they can decide to ignore us, but we are also hopeful that something can be done. And then we are pleading that it shouldn't be ignored, especially with regards to our foundational learning. And then once the analysis shows that something can be done, we are pleading with them, and then the government, both, that it should not be ignored. Something really needs to be done.
Tell me, what could be the consequences if they choose, maybe they say, well, these are pertinent issues you're bringing up, but we simply can't, in delivering this program, some cuts must apply, like we've seen, structural adjustment in the 80s, among others. And it may not be necessarily that they ignore it, but maybe it's not realistic in the program they are granting us. What could be the consequences of that on basic education? That's just it.
Yes. So I think we have said enough the consequences that may come. We are going to produce very poor learning outcomes in our country. And 2030 is just here with us. We are not going to meet the SDG part of education. We are not going to miss it. And it has serious implications on our education system and every aspect of our economy, because education is very, very key. It is the only way that we can take away poverty in our country, social vices coming up, youth, violence, and all that. So if these things will be ignored, then we should be ready to face the consequences of poor learning outcomes, getting more youth who are out of school, armed robbery, increase in social vices, and a lot more. So these are the reasons why we want everyone to come on board, very considerate, and analyze the situation well, so that something can be done about this petition.
Bernice, thank you so much for joining the conversation this morning. We're immensely grateful for your time. Let me wrap with John. So the same set of questions to you. What happens if the IMF says, maybe a good proposal, but we simply can't toe that line? What then happens, and what would be the consequences on the educational sector at the basic level? John.
Thank you very much, Ben. Moving forward, it is important to also underscore the point that, the civil society organizations have been engaging government in this discussion. And so this latest action is meant to broaden the level of stakeholders around the table in the Ghana IMF bailout process. And so the discussion is ongoing. Now, what happens should government IMF not listen? Or you say, yes, this is fine, but we would move on. Like Benny said, the challenge is enormous. What it does mean is that we will not be meeting some of the SDGs, and that will have consequences, in terms of Ghana's educational development. And so, is it not worrying that in terms of the school child performance at the basic education level, the standard testing that was carried out, just a little over a quarter, met the minimum standards in mathematics and English? What that means is that government and all stakeholders, including you and I, would have enormous challenges to face. Then also, in terms of feeding of the child at school or school children at school, you have already seen what is happening, as far as the food contractors under the Ghana School Feeding Program is concerned. What that means is that government need to be seen at least meeting some of these recommendations, the proposals, in a way that will also create some form of sanity in our governance system to ensure that all stakeholders understand. Because you need to also remember that this is a homegrown, the IMF within the bailout process is calling for homegrown solutions, a homegrown program. And therefore, it is important that critical stakeholders come together to understand and make strategic decisions. And so this process is geared towards supporting government, building consensus, and ensuring that we are agreeing on homegrown solutions that everyone will subscribe to, if not everyone, majority of Ghanaians will subscribe to. And then we are going to continuously have a lot more discussion around even ring-fencing some of these discretionary expenditures and see what we can cut more rather than cutting down on the critical social protection programs. And we know government is listening. We know that the IMF is listening because the IMF board members also include critical members from the GPE who are under whose watch we all agreed upon the minimum benchmarks on financing educational development. And therefore, we believe they will take this petition and our letter so seriously. And so that at the end of the day, we would all celebrate because there are no victors and losers in this arrangement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That ties into a story I'm looking at here in the Daily Analyst. A direct finance minister to release funds to pay caterers, Otiko Jaba tells Kofu Ado, a former Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection. But that is it with this latest petition to the IMF by Africa Education Watch, together with over 600 civil society organizations who focus on education. Those who joined us for the conversation, John Unko, Country Director, ActionAid Ghana, and Bernice Imperi Jechi, National Coordinator of the Ghana National Education Campaign Coalition. When we return on the AM show, we're actually going to be contemplating the New Age CEO Summit, which comes off tomorrow. And of course, we'll be taking your calls, among others. But before we do that, I'm going to take a sip of water. We know water is life. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And they have the perfect sizes for everybody, from the children right up to the adult. 330 and 500 ml bottles, 750 ml if that's what you're looking for. And if you're a big drinker, 1.5 liters. If you're thinking of something for your office or home, they have 19-liter jar bottles, which are ideal for offices and homes. So all you must do now is drink Awake purified drinking water wherever you go. So choose a bottle of Awake. Remember, for every bottle you buy, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center for those who cannot afford treatment. It's another quality product by Casapreco Company Limited. If you'd like to purchase in bulk, this is the number to call: 0262 351 251. 0262 351 251. This advert is FDA approved. Stay with us on the AM show. We'll be right back.